Mysticism is a broad subject that is quite slippery to probe. Even so, I think it is okay to ask a preliminary question as a first step to exploring the possibility or impossibility of whether Sufism can be identified with mysticism. The term mysticism comes from the ancient Greek. Its etymology comes from the word myo, which means to conceal, to close, or mystery. Mysticism in Christianity refers to the biblical liturgy, spirituality, and contemplative dimensions of early and medieval Christianity. During the modern period, the definition of mysticism evolved to include a wider range of beliefs and even ideologies related to extraordinary experiences and states of mind. Mysticism in common speech usage is a word of very uncertain connotations. In German, it has been used as an equivalent for two characteristically different German words. First, Mysticismus, which means the cult of supernatural for theosophical pursuits, for a spiritualistic exploitation of psychical research. Second, mystic, which means immediate experience of a divine human intercourse and relationship. Furthermore, the word mysticism is generally understood in the latter sense. However, mysticism is also understood as a theological and metaphysical doctrine regarding the possibility of the soul to unite with the ultimate reality. The definition of the term mysticism is a lively issue that has been discussed since the second half of the 19th century. Even Gershom G. Scholem says that there are almost as many definitions of mysticism as there are authors. According to Annemarie Schimmel, mysticism is a great spiritual current that flows in all religious traditions. In the broadest sense, mysticism can be defined as awareness of the one reality, which might be called wisdom, light, love, and even nothing. However, such definitions cannot fully describe what it actually is. The existing definitions are only hints so that it can superficially be understood, since the purpose of mysticism is indescribable and can't be comprehended and explained by the mind, but it requires a spiritual experience that is independent of the mind. The goal of mysticism is unio mystica, a state where the soul experiences fusion and unification with the absolute being. Quote, mysticism can be defined as love the absolute, for the power that separates true mysticism from them, asceticism, is love. Divine love makes the seeker capable of bearing, even of enjoying, all the pains and afflictions that God showers upon him in order to test him and to purify his soul. This love can carry the mystic's heart to the divine presence, like the falcon which carries away the prey, separating him thus from all that is created in time. On the one hand, mysticism as a spiritual experience is a psychological matter, and on the other hand, the doctrine of mysticism is a metaphysical inquiry. The mystical experience is the oldest experience that is not limited by a certain group. The experience is a fundamental and personal religious or divine experience. It might be said that mystical experience is marked by the emergence of a type of consciousness which is not sharply focalized and clearly differentiated into a subject-object state. The subject-object state becomes unified and indivisible. Quote, the subject and object are fused into an undivided one. Whatever is seen, heard, or felt in these moments is flooded with an inrush from the abysses of the inner life. Deep-lying powers, not ordinarily put into play, seem suddenly liberated. The usual insulations which sunder our inner life into something like compartments seem shot through. The whole being, in an integral and undivided experience, finds itself. All types of mysticism culminate in some form of unification experience, feeling the unity of either the internal or external reality. Its characteristics is a type of consciousness detached from empirical impressions and dissociation of self-understanding. It is true that There are differences amongst religious traditions, particularly due to the teachings of the culture or belief system and how the one achieves the experience. Annemarie Schimmel divides mystical experience into two kinds, mysticism of infinity and mysticism of personal. The former type can be found in Plotinus's philosophical expressions and in the Upanishads, especially as elaborated in Shankara's Advaita philosophy. Sufism comes close to it in some of the forms developed by the Ibn Arabi school. Quote, here the Numen is conceived as the being beyond all being or even as the not being, because it cannot be described by any of the categories of finite thought. It is infinite, timeless, spaceless, the absolute existence, and the only reality. By contrast, the word possesses only a limited reality, which derives its conditioned existence from the absolute existence of the divine. It may be symbolized as the boundless ocean in which the individual self vanishes like a drop, or as the desert, which shows itself in ever new sand dunes that hide its depths, or as the water out of which the world is crystallized like ice. While mysticism of personal can be found in the early development of Sufism. The latter form is that the relationship between creature and creator is still distinguished, between the servant and God is maintained. The diversity of mysticism expressions remains based on experience of the ultimate reality, the supreme being, annihilation, cosmic sublimation, unification, unveiling, enlightenment, and nothingness. According to Geshem Solom, there is no mysticism in general. There is only a particular and certain mystical system, such as Hindu mysticism, Christian mysticism, Jewish mysticism, Buddhism mysticism, or Islamic mysticism. Mysticism as an esoteric doctrine must certainly be intertwined closely with the exoteric doctrine in a stream of certain religious beliefs. I think there is no mysticism devoid of pre-existing materials or exoteric teachings. William James, a psychologist who had given much attention to mystical experience, suggests 4 common characteristics of mystical experience. Those are ineffability, the noetic quality, transience, and passivity. Although James's classical work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, has caught much criticism, it is helpful enough in the interest of this preliminary study to investigate the Sufi experience. The Sufis often report their mystical experience. The mystical experience referred to here is the unity experience between the self and the ultimate reality. When this experience takes place, the Sufi's tongue becomes speechless. It is said that there is no effort to verbalize it. However, the mystical experience does not last long, as the experience of fana, annihilation, which takes place before baqa, subsistence. When fana is finished, the Sufis can reconstruct the experience by using symbolic language. According to Junaid al-Baghdadi, oneness or Tawhid is a total togetherness with God. When asked about the meaning of Tawhid, he answered, "It is all images and knowledge melt in it." It can be seen that there is a closeness of the concept of unity, which is the core of the Plotinus school, namely that all images merge in it. When explaining the one in the state of fana and baqa, Junaid stated, "One is absent. It does exist and does not exist at the same time. He exists like in his non-existent. He does not exist like his previous existence. Then he exists after he doesn't exist before, and he exists forever." According to Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, as a prominent exponent of Sufism, the highest level of Tawhid is that of Tawhid al-Muwahhidin. That is when one doesn't witness anything except God's existence. This is the highest Tawhid in Ma'rifat Fillah, Gnosis. One doesn't witness all in diversity but in unity. This condition is called Fana Fit Tawhid, or also called Ainul Ma'rifah, the essence of Gnosis. So nothing is seen by the Sufi except his existence alone. Mystical experience really grabs reason so strongly that can give rise to a state of intoxication. The philosophical school of Sufism or Tasawwuf Falsafi is often identified with ecstatic utterances or shatohiyat. Etymologically, shat means al-haroka, which stands for a very strong feeling of movement, so that it is uttered in an expression that sounds strange to the listener. Shat is also described as overflowing water in the river, an overflow of feelings that a Sufi cannot retain. Some of the famous figures were Abu Yazid al-Bistami and al-Hallaj. The ecstatic utterances take place because, first, the strength of wajud or feeling. Second, the experience is that of the experience of unification, ittihad. Third, the Sufi is experiencing a state of spiritual intoxication or asukr ruhani. Spiritual intoxication due to the unveiling of al-haq makes the mystic realize that he is he and that he is he. Fourth, the Sufi hears divine promptings that prompts him to unification. Fifth, this condition is experienced by the Sufi without consciousness. Abu Bakr al-Qalabasi states that a Sufi who is in fana is one who sees everything as one, and he becomes very passive because all his movements are in accordance with al-Haq's will. Not a single action is against his will. He also becomes free from actions that are contrary to God's will and sinks into a state that accords with God's will. However, such a state is transient and temporarily very short, since as soon as the state of fana is over, he will be in baqa or subsistence. In another sense, actually fana is the transient condition of the Sufis towards the state of baqa. When the mystical experience takes place, a Sufi is speechless. There are no words that can represent his condition. Ineffable. This is because the experience occurs in a unitary state. Conceptualization efforts can only take place within the state of diversity, because only in the word of diversity can the references and differentiations in the mind be used. After the mystical witnessing process or shuhud occurs, the subject's consciousness returns to the word of plurality. Memory can collect and recollect the experience in order to create a concept or an understanding. However, because the basis of mystical experience is metaphysical fixation, the expressions in reference to the word of diversity are only contradictory ones, cannot really be fully adequate. In one of his aphorisms, Ibn al-Sakandari explains the significance of Sufi's expressions. Actually, a Sufi does not have a slightest hint to express his spiritual experience. The inability to express is a reality experienced during the mystical experience. Ibn al-Sakandari explains that ecstatic utterances should not be understood as experience itself, but they are merely spoken expressions because of an extremely strong feeling. It should nevertheless be understood that the truth of mystical experience is not due to the truth of the expression. Neither words nor speech can translate this sublime experience. For the Sufis, gnosis or ma'rifah is the main goal. In mystical experience, a Sufi experiences kashaf, unveiling, so that he can know secrets that are unknown to common people. With the stage of unveiling, the Sufis know some things that are veiled to common people. Mystical experience does contain knowledge that is not obtained by reason and senses. Acquiring spiritual taste, dhawq, and unveiling, kashf, the Sufis break through the horizon of outer knowledge to the horizon of inner knowledge. It is not obtained through reason or senses, but through direct intuition. In fact, kashf is a form of ijtihad and can be used to understand a subject matter. According to the Sufis, through kashf, the credibility and accountability of knowledge cannot be denied because it is an acquisition or enlightenment attained from God, al-ilmu laduni. To sum up, mysticism as a general term encompasses psychological as well as intellectual ideas and experiences. Regardless of the diverse forms of mystical experience in various cultures, religious traditions, and in historical period in the history, is there at least one common goal with which all mystical experiences might be able to be linked? Some scholars argue that the state of unification is the core of mystical experience. I think we should defer substantiating this issue. It is stated that the state of unification is not a visually specific mode of unity and identity, but witness to the unity and the disappearance of plurality, be it the experience of union either with the one which is personal as the Western mysticism, or with the impersonal and even nothingness as the Eastern mysticism. In such a mystical state, it is said that the duality of subject-object supposedly becomes meaningless. Back to our preliminary effort to identify Sufism as mysticism. According to Abdul Wafa At-Taftazani, Sufism in general has 5 characteristics which include psychological, moral, and epistemological dimensions. First, moral refinement. Sufism has certain moral values whose purpose is to cleanse the soul. Thus, to achieve it requires physical and spiritual practice in restraining the worldly desire. Second, annihilation, fana, in the ultimate reality. This is the hallmark of Sufism in its very sense. Third, direct intuitive knowledge, or huduri. This is an epistemological aspect. Fourth, happiness, in the sense of a state free from anxiety and fear of something unreal. This happiness is the result or effect of the unification with the ultimate reality which cannot be expressed. Fifth, symbolization in expression. Even though it cannot be expressed, the Sufis often maneuver to use symbols to express their experience of their knowledge of the experience. It is because such a sublime experience is indescribable, so Sufis often use symbolic language packaged in the form of poetry. Hence, roughly speaking, Sufism as spiritual experience is sort of mysticism. Nonetheless, the term Sufism has a religious and distinctive connotation. The term is usually used in a specific reference, namely to refer to the Islamic mysticism. Quote, it might be said truly enough that all mystical experiences eventually meet in a single point, but that point assumes widely different aspects according to the mystic's religion, race, and temperament, where the converging lines of approach admit of almost infinite variety. Though all the great types of mysticism have something in common, each is marked by peculiar characteristics resulting from the circumstances in which it arose and flourished. Just as the Christian type cannot be understood without reference to Christianity, so the Islamic type must be viewed in connection with the outward and inward development of Islam. Thank you so much for watching. You can support this small channel or help me out monetarily via PayPal. I'll see you next time.